Hey, it's Zach from Rescue Rebuild, and today we are going to show you how to build some agility steps. This is a simple project that you can do to help your local shelter. It can turn a play yard into a much more fun space for the dogs, and it also gives people a place to sit. So the tools that we're going to need for this project include a circular saw. You can use a corded, you can use a cordless, you can also use a miter saw if you prefer that. We're also going to need a drill with a 1/4 inch drill bit, and we're going to need an impact driver, and we need a tip for the impact driver that's going to match the screws that we're using. In this case, we're going to use 3-inch deck screws. These are epoxy coated deck screws, which is really good for being outside. We're also going to use some 4.5-inch headlock screws. These are just a little bit beefier and they have a nice wide head for attaching our legs to this. We're going to use a speed square to help us cut and to help us line everything up. And then of course we're going to have a tape measure and a pencil to get everything cut to length. Very important that we use ear protection and eye protection on this. The first step in this process is to take a look at our cut list and to make sure that we have enough wood to make this happen. So in order to build these, we need a few different pieces of wood. We need some 2x6s, and we want to make sure that they're pressure treated 2x6s so that they survive outside. And these 2x6s are going to be used for our frame and also for our decking on top of this. In addition to that, we're going to need a 4x4. Also pressure treated, and we want to make sure that we have enough 4x4 to cut 4 legs out of. And then the last thing are actual steps. And so you can make these yourself, but it's much easier to go to the store and to buy these. So to determine the length of our legs for our steps, we're going to need to measure our pre-cut stair stringers. So we want to make sure that this is totally flat on the bottom, and we're going to take our tape measure and measure up to the top. So in this case, it's an even 19 inches. And so we know we need to make our legs 19 inches long. So let's get started cutting, and then we'll start putting all this together. All right, now that we've got all of our pieces cut, the next step is to give this a quick sanding so that we know that there's nothing that's going to hurt the dog's feet. We're going to try to sand the edges where we cut just to make sure there are no sharp edges. And then we also want to just pick a side that's going to be the top for each of these. And if there's any rough spots on there, we want to make sure we sand that too. Now, one thing you want to look out for when we're choosing which side of these boards wants to be the top is the natural curve of the board. Ideally, we want to have it so that the high point is in the middle, and that will allow the water to roll off the top of these when it rains. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 2 pieces that are 48 inches long and our 2 pieces that are 33 inches long, and we're going to build the platform for the top of the agility steps. So to do that, we're going to take this stair stringer and we're going to measure from here to here. And I'll explain why in a minute. So we measure that, we get 9 5/8. And it's a good idea to check at least one other of your stair stringers just to make sure that they are all consistent. And we're going to take our 48-inch pieces and we're going to measure in that number that we just measured. So 9 5/8 from each end. And so for both of these, we'll do the same thing on both ends. Now once we have that marked, we're going to take our speed square and we're going to hook it on, and we're going to draw a line right where we made those marks. And we're going to draw an X to the inside of that line. And what that tells us is that is where our board is going to get installed. So we have all of these marked. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking our 33-inch pieces and installing them on the side of our line that has the X. And then the other 48-inch piece will sit on top of these, and that forms our platform. So for this, I'm going to use 3-inch deck screws. These are epoxy coated screws that are rated for outdoor use. And what I'm going to do is use a hammer to start them in the wood. So I'm going to hold this right where it's going to go, and I'm going to come around the other side with my screw, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. Once my screw is here, we can use a drill and just start this, but what we have found is that it is easier to give it a couple taps with a hammer, and that holds it there for you. So nice and easy. The other thing you can do if you want to help line this up is to, on the back side, also measure 9 5/8 with a little X, and that'll tell us exactly where these screws need to be. And we're going to go ahead and screw these pieces together, making sure that we stay on the correct side of the line. And so that's the inside of the line. And we're going to go ahead and put one screw in to hold it there. And again, we're going to take our speed square and we're going to use that to make sure that we're staying square so that both these pieces aren't rotated in either way. And we'll go ahead and run our next screw in. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat that for the other side, flip it and do the same thing. And so the next step is going to be to attach our legs to this platform, which we're going to do as though this is upside down. That'll make it a little bit easier to attach this. So what we're going to be doing is tucking them in the corners of each of these four corners, and we're going to stay inside of this box that we made. And so what we're doing here is trying to make sure that we're flush with the underside of this so that when we flip it over, it will be flush with the top. In order to install these, we're going to use a combination of screws as well as the headlock lag screws that we got. The deck screws are going to be used to hold this in place while we install the bigger ones. So just to prep a little bit here, what we're going to do is take our drill with our 1/4-inch drill bit, and we're going to drill in each direction for each of these four corners. So what we're looking to do here is come in about half of the width of your post. And so in order to do that, you can come and you can mark it, or you can measure half the width of the post, which should be about 1 3/4 inches. I've already done that, so I'm going to go ahead and just drill one hole about halfway up. And I'm going to do that in each direction. So the next step is going to be to take a deck screw, and just like last time, we're going to use a hammer to help us hold that there. And in this situation, I'm just going to pick either on top of or below this hole that we just drilled. It's not really that important. This is just to hold while we install that bigger lag screw. Now I'm also just going to raise this up a little bit and hold it up on my foot. You could also use a block of wood and have my hand underneath just to make sure that it's staying flush with what will be the top of this platform. I'm going to take our impact driver or drill again and run these screws in. Okay, so there's our first corner done. So we've used our screws to install these temporarily, and now we're going to switch over to our headlock screws or lag screws if you prefer that. And we're going to go ahead and run these in to those holes that we just drilled. And we want to make sure that these are basically flush in the wood. And so that gives us a really strong connection there. So that's our first side. Now we're going to flip and repeat for the other side. We have the option here to choose how many steps our risers have, which we talked about earlier. The ones that we're using for this are only 3 rises, and so these are actually pretty strong on their own. A lot of the times what we'll do if we're making these taller is to attach a 2x4 on the inside of these braces, just to give it a little bit of stability. If someone were to kick these or some dogs were playing really hard and bumped into these, we wouldn't want this to get loose and fall over. These are very short and they're attached really well now, so we're going to opt not to use them on here just for a little bit of a cleaner look. So the next step is going to be to take our stair stringers, and because we measured this as the same as our stringer, we can actually set this right in here. And what we're going to do is use deck screws to attach this. Now right now this is not quite flush, and so you may have to look at the ground underneath it and just move some dirt, or in this case gravel, just to make sure that this is sitting flush. And so what we're going to do is use deck screws, and just like before, I would recommend using a hammer to start these. And I usually do about 3 screws here. We're going to get this flush all the way across the top, and then we're going to install that screw. Okay, so that's the first of 4. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat that for the other 3 parts. Starting to look like something. We have all of our stair stringers in, and it's time for the fun part. This is what really makes it look like the finished product. We're going to take our 2x6s that we sanded, and we're going to start laying them on the top. We want to make sure when we're doing this that we are keeping the good sides that we sanded facing up, and we also want to check our boards on the ends to make sure that we have a nice piece of wood facing the outside. So as we do this, we're going to fill in the whole top, and then we're going to confirm that our overhang on each side is about the same. And so the easiest way to do that, rather than trying to do the math, is literally just to lay all of these out. So in this case, we used 9 pieces across the top, which is usually what this works out to be if you use 2x6. And we're just going to basically eyeball this. and say that these overhangs are about the same. If you're not comfortable eyeballing, you can of course take your tape measure and you can measure out to see what this ends up at. Sometimes these boards can vary up to 1/4 of an inch in thickness because they're moisture content. And so these boards will shrink over time. And so a lot of people will be tempted to leave a gap in between each of these boards. But my recommendation to you would be, if you just purchased these from the store, to butt them up against each other. As these dry, they will lose 1/8 to 1/4 in width. So for now, all the boards are touching. We're gonna double check our overhangs on both sides, and we wanna make sure they're nice and flush, and we wanna make sure everything is smooth. Once we have that done, we're gonna get our screws out again. We can use our 3-inch deck screws again. I'm just gonna make sure these are totally nice and flush, and I'm gonna start by tapping these in, and we wanna come in about 3/4 of an inch again, because that's the thickness, that's half the thickness rather of the board that we're going to be screwing into. Something that can speed this up if you have a second person helping you is to have them go ahead and tap these screws in. And sometimes I'll even do this myself, just to make this really go quick, and then you can start screwing these down. Now that we have the top on, the last thing to do is to put our treads on our steps. This is the same procedure that we just did for the top, just 2 boards per step. And we're just gonna line this up, same overhang as the top. It'll be flush with the outside of our frame. And then we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna do 2 screws in the end of each of these to attach these in place. So we're all done with our agility steps. Marco here is our first one to enjoy them, and he hopped right up. So these are a great addition to any play yard. Now that we've built them, we want to give it a little bit of time for them to dry before we put any finish on them. So we're going to wait a few weeks to let the heat and the sun dry out these steps, and then we can apply either something like a Thompson's water seal, a clear finish, or you can apply a deck stain, or you can even use paint. If you are going to use paint, I would recommend waiting probably 2 to 3 months so that they can really fully dry. And then dogs like Marco can enjoy your steps for a very long time to come. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can keep up to date with all of our awesome rescue rebuild videos.